Phyllis Diller was one of the most unusual and unforgettable women in comedy. Her loud laugh, messy wigs, and wild jokes about her husband Fang made her a star. To millions, she seemed like a woman who only cared about making people laugh. But behind the big wigs and the cigarette holder was a woman who carried heavy pain for most of her life. For over 30 years, Phyllis visited a place almost every week. She never told her fans about it, and she never turned it into part of her comedy. The secret was her daughter Sally, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and lived in institutional care. Phyllis went to see her regularly, showing the love of a mother in private while hiding the heartbreak in public. When Sally died in 1993 at only 49 years old, it broke Phyllis. But the world never really knew. That ability to hide her pain and keep smiling is what made her both strong and tragic. Her story is not only about being a pioneer in comedy, but also about surviving losses most people could not imagine. Phyllis Diller's story begins in Lima, Ohio, where she was born on July 17, 1917. Her parents were older than most parents at the time. Her father Perry was already 55, and her mother Frances was 36. Growing up in a quiet house with older people shaped the way Phyllis saw life. Funerals and death were common around her, but instead of being scared, she grew strangely comfortable with dark subjects. That love of dark humor later became part of her comedy style. Even though her family had German-Irish roots and practiced the Methodist faith, Phyllis never felt connected to religion. She decided early on that she wanted to see the world in her own way. At school, she was playful and loved making jokes with classmates. These little jokes didn't seem important at the time, but they planted a seed for the future. During the Great Depression, her family struggled with money. To help, young Phyllis sold newspapers and did whatever she could to earn a little extra. This early hardship gave her a tough spirit and a work ethic that she would need for the rest of her life. By the time Phyllis was 10 years old, it was already clear that she had special talent. She was accepted into the Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago, where she studied piano. For a young girl from a small town, this was an amazing opportunity. Her piano playing skills were so advanced that she could perform with orchestras. But as impressive as it was, Phyllis began to feel that music wasn't really her true path. She compared herself to her teachers and believed she could never reach their level. This made her give up piano even though she was very talented. Quitting was painful, but in the long run, it opened the door to something else: comedy. At the time, though, life was not easy. The Great Depression hit hard, and her family's money ran out in 1933. She had to leave the conservatory after only 3 years. Phyllis tried college again in 1935, studying music education at Bluffton, but once again, she left before finishing. By 1937, she was married, and her new life as a wife and mother began. Looking back, she often said quitting music may have saved her. Instead of playing piano in a quiet orchestra, she found a way to bring joy to millions of people. Phyllis Diller's story begins in the small city of Lima, Ohio, where she was born on July 17, 1917. Her parents were quite different from most others in their town. Her father, Perry Marcus Driver, was 55 when she was born, and her mother Frances was 30. Being raised by older parents made Phyllis grow up faster than many of her classmates. Life in the house was quiet, serious, and often centered around health problems or funerals of family friends. Instead of being frightened, Phyllis found herself strangely fascinated by the darker side of life. She often joked later that she grew comfortable with death early on, which helped her laugh in situations where others cried. This attitude was unusual for a little girl, but it prepared her for the career she would one day have. Phyllis came from a German-Irish Methodist background, but she never felt strongly about religion. She believed people should look at the world in their own way, not through rules or traditions. At school, she was playful, full of energy, and always ready to make her classmates laugh. Humor came naturally to her. While most children tried to behave properly, Phyllis stood out for her quick wit. Those jokes may have seemed small at the time, but they were the first signs of her comic genius. During the Great Depression, her family, like so many others, struggled to make ends meet. To help out, Phyllis sold newspapers and took on small jobs. This tough period taught her resilience and gave her a strong work ethic. Even as a child, she understood that life could be harsh, but she also learned that laughter could make hard times easier to bear. These early experiences shaped her personality and prepared her for a world that was often unforgiving. At just 10 years old, Phyllis showed another remarkable talent: music. She was accepted into the Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago, which was an incredible achievement for a girl from a small Ohio town. She trained as a pianist and quickly impressed her teachers. She could play at a professional level and was even capable of performing with orchestras. Her dream seemed to be to build a future in classical music. But over time, doubts began to creep into her mind. She compared herself to her instructors and felt she could never reach their level of brilliance. Instead of pushing through, she decided to give up her music ambitions. Walking away from something she was so good at was painful, but it also showed her honest self-awareness. Her family's financial situation made things worse. In 1933, the money ran out, and she had to leave the conservatory after only 3 years. Still determined to find her way, she enrolled at Bluffton College in 1935 to study music education. Once again, she was unable to finish. The constant struggle for stability weighed heavily on her. But instead of seeing this as failure, Phyllis often joked that quitting music saved her from a life of playing piano in a quiet orchestra pit. She knew deep inside she wanted something louder, brighter, and more exciting. In 1937, her life changed again when she married Sherwood Diller. Together, they would have 6 children. For many years, Phyllis lived as a wife and mother, but that creative spark inside her refused to die. She had no idea yet, but her true call in comedy was waiting for her just around the corner in the years that followed. Phyllis lived what seemed like an ordinary suburban life. She supported her husband and raised her children, but money was always tight, and she often worried about how to make ends meet. To help the family, she worked a variety of jobs. One of them was writing advertising copy for a radio station, where she made $75 a week. This might not sound like much today, but for Phyllis, it was steady work that used her creative mind. Yet she knew she wanted more. She wanted to perform, to connect with people, and to use her sense of humor to make others laugh. Her first attempts at comedy, however, were not easy. She got the chance to perform stand-up at a small venue, but her debut was a disaster. Her timing was off, her nerves got the best of her, and the audience did not laugh. For many people, that would have been enough to quit forever. But Phyllis had a unique spirit. Instead of giving up, she saw failure as a chance to learn. She went back, studied her performance, and kept practicing. That resilience was one of her strongest qualities. She understood that success was never immediate. It came through persistence and courage. By the early 1950s, she began developing a stage character that was unlike anyone else, a self-deprecating woman who made jokes about her own looks, her cooking, and especially her lazy husband Fang. The audience had never seen anything like it, and slowly, Phyllis started to make her mark. Everything changed. In 1955, when Phyllis Diller was given the opportunity to perform at the Purple Onion, a nightclub in San Francisco known for edgy entertainment. This was the turning point of her career. At first, the booking was only supposed to last for 2 weeks, but Phyllis's act was so unique and funny that the run extended, week after week, until it reached an astonishing 89 weeks. People couldn't get enough of her. Her costumes, her wigs, her cigarette holder, and above all, her booming laugh made her unforgettable. Audiences laughed, not only at her jokes, but at the characters she created on stage. She wasn't just telling jokes, she was performing comedy theater. The Purple Onion gave her confidence and exposure. Soon, she caught the attention of national television. By 1959, she was performing on Jack Parr's Tonight Show, which opened the door to a much bigger audience. From there, she appeared on shows hosted by Bob Hope and Ed Sullivan. Phyllis had gone from a struggling housewife to one of the most recognizable female comedians in America. What made her stand out was her honesty. She didn't try to be glamorous or charming like many women of her era. Instead, she laughed at her flaws and made the audience laugh with her. She joked about being unattractive, about cooking disasters, about raising children. This was revolutionary at a time when women were expected to be graceful and perfect. Phyllis flipped the script, showing that humor could be powerful, liberating, and deeply human. The 1960s and 1970s were the golden years for Phyllis Diller. She became a regular on television variety shows, game shows, and talk shows. She appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, Hollywood Squares, and the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast. Her sharp wit made her a favorite guest, and her outrageous outfits always caught attention. Phyllis also became a pioneer by headlining her own television specials, and even starring in a sitcom called The Pruitts of Southampton. While the sitcom didn't last long, it proved that Phyllis was more than just a guest star. She was a leading entertainer. Phyllis also worked alongside some of the biggest names in show business. She developed a close friendship with Bob Hope, who invited her to join him on several of his USO tours to entertain American troops overseas. Her act brought laughter to soldiers who were far from home, and she felt proud to give them a moment of joy during difficult times. She also recorded comedy albums, wrote books, and built a reputation as one of the hardest working women in Hollywood. Yet, despite her fame, Phyllis remained humble about her success. She often reminded people that she started her career late in life, at nearly 40 years old, and that perseverance was the real key to her success. But while the spotlight made her appear unstoppable, Phyllis carried private burdens. Her marriages were troubled, her finances were often unstable, and behind the scenes, she worried deeply about her children. The world saw her as the queen of comedy, but at home, she faced heartbreak that she kept carefully hidden from her fans. The wigs, and laughter. Phyllis Diller's personal life was filled with challenges. Her marriage to Sherwood Diller lasted over 2 decades, but it was far from happy. They eventually divorced in 1965, leaving Phyllis to raise her children largely on her own. Money was always a problem. Even with fame, she had expenses, debts, and the heavy responsibility of providing for a large family. She admitted that at times, she was drowning financially and had to keep performing just to stay afloat. The greatest pain in her life however, came from her children. Out of her 6 kids, several struggled with health and personal issues. Her daughter Sally suffered from schizophrenia and required long-term care in an institution. For more than 30 years, Phyllis visited her faithfully, keeping the visits private from her fans. When Sally died in 1993 at the age of 49, Phyllis was devastated. She also endured the deaths of 2 other children during her lifetime, a grief that she rarely spoke about publicly. Yet, through all this, she never let the public see her break. On stage, she was always smiling, always laughing, always making others forget their worries. This ability to mask her sorrow was both her strength and her tragedy. Phyllis believed that her audience came to her for joy, not sadness. She often said that laughter was her way of surviving the darkest moments of her life. Even when she was suffering privately, she gave the world a reason to smile. It was a selfless act, but also a heavy burden. Even as she aged, Phyllis Diller refused to fade away. In the 1980s, she embraced plastic surgery, openly joking about her many procedures. Unlike other celebrities who tried to hide their surgeries, Phyllis made it part of her comedy act. She joked about her facelifts, her nose jobs, and her constant search for youth. By laughing at herself, she disarmed critics and turned a personal choice into another source of humor. In addition to stand-up, she explored other creative passions. She returned to her first love, music, by playing piano for fun, and sometimes in private performances. She also became a painter, creating colorful works that surprised many who only knew her as a comedian. Phyllis proved that creativity had no limits and that age was never a barrier to success. She appeared in films, television, guest spots, and voice roles in animated shows and movies. Even younger generations who had never seen her on stage recognized her voice in popular productions. In 2002, at the age of 85, Phyllis announced her retirement from stand-up comedy. After more than 4 decades of performing, she decided it was time to slow down. Still, she remained active in public life, giving interviews, writing, and making occasional appearances. She continued to be loved and respected, not just as a comedian, but as a cultural icon who had opened doors for women in comedy. Phyllis Diller spent her final years in Los Angeles, surrounded by friends and family. Even in old age, she never lost her humor. She would often crack jokes about her health, her wrinkles, and the challenges of growing old. On August 20, 2012, she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 9. The comedy world mourned the loss of a legend. Tributes poured in from comedians, actors, and fans around the world. Many described her as a trailblazer who made it possible for women to stand on stage and be funny without apology. Our legacy is enormous. Phyllis wrote more than 50,000 jokes during her career. She inspired comedians like Joan Rivers, Ellen DeGeneres, and countless others who followed in her footsteps. She proved that women could not only survive in comedy, but thrive, commanding the same respect as their male counterparts. Beyond comedy, her story is one of strength, survival, and love. She faced poverty, failure, heartbreak, and loss. Yet she never stopped moving forward. She never let tragedy define her. Instead, she turned her pain into laughter and gave it away to millions. Perhaps the most touching part of her story is the secret she carried: the quiet, faithful visits to her daughter Sally for more than 30 years. This act of private love showed the world a different side of Phyllis Diller, one that was deeply human and compassionate. While audiences saw only the big laugh and the outrageous costumes, behind it all was a mother who carried both joy and sorrow with grace. Phyllis Diller was more than a comedian. She was a pioneer, a survivor, and a woman who dared to live life on her own terms. Her story teaches us that behind every laugh, there can be pain. Yet, laughter can also be a powerful way to heal. From her humble beginnings in Ohio to her rise as a national star, Phyllis never stopped pushing boundaries. She turned insecurities into punchlines and heartbreak into strength. Even now, years after her passing, her influence continues to shape comedy and inspire people around the world. The secret she kept hidden was not just about her daughter, Sally. It was about the truth that life is never as simple as it looks on the outside. Everyone carries battles the world doesn't see.